For my philosophy through literature and film video project, I'm going to go over the problem of evil. It's a deductive proof. It's got 6 premises, and it shows why the Christian notion of an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God is logically impossible. You can see here the argument has 8 simple statements listed as P through W, and right below that I have the symbolized version of the argument, which in plain English would be translated as if God exists, he is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. Second premise is if God is omniscient and evil exists, then he knows about it. The third premise is that if God is omnipotent, he can prevent evil. The fourth is that if God prevents evil, evil does not exist. The fifth reads, if God can prevent evil and knows that it exists, then if he does not prevent it, he is not good. The sixth reads that evil does exist, and the conclusion is quite simply that God cannot possibly exist. Next to the argument itself, you can see I've written a derivation out for it. It's a pretty simple indirect derivation. You assume the opposite of the conclusion, and you work your way down to see if you find any logical contradictions. If you find one, it means that your assumption was incorrect and that the conclusion itself is true. It's pretty simple. It doesn't really require anything more complicated than simple modus ponens and modus tollens argument forms. Now, when people try to beat this argument to say that it's wrong or that it doesn't work, usually they go after premise 5. They'll say things like, God works in mysterious ways. He's beyond human understanding, and it all works out for the greater good, which doesn't really work. I mean, premise 5 is really just a moral judgment. It says that if anyone, knows about something that's wrong in the world, and they have the power to stop it, that they should stop it, and that if they don't, they're not making the correct moral choice. It's an ideal, and as an ideal, there really isn't a whole lot you can say against it. The problem comes, some say, when you try to apply a human moral ideal to God. What people say is that God isn't subject to our morals, that God is above them and beyond them. He transcends. So let's grant that for a moment. Let's say, yes, God transcends human morality. Somehow, what it means to be good for a human and what it means to be good for God could possibly be separate things. The problem doesn't go away. Because if you throw out the definition for good, then you have to throw away the label entirely. I mean, you can't say that God is good if you don't have any way of determining what good is in the first place. And that's a problem for Christianity. I mean, God's supposed goodness is the very reason that he is qualified to reign supreme. It's why he is worthy of worship. It's the reason that he's even capable of judging humanity for their imperfections and sins. Taking away the certainty that God is all good is really in some ways more destructive to the Christian religion than to say that God doesn't exist in the first place. But that's all you're left with. Either a God that isn't good or a God that doesn't exist at all. At least based on the argument here. Well, that's all I've got. Thanks for listening.